Okay, so first of all, let's start with what is project RAID management. First thing to point out is RAID is actually an acronym. RAID stands for risk, assumptions, issues, and dependencies. Now, when we're managing risk, that's quite a big topic in itself. And the way that risks are managed, the same processes in which risks are managed is the same processes in which we would then manage assumptions, issues, and dependencies. Because when we talk about project risk management, we're talking about the processes that we go through in order to manage our risks, to identify them, to analyze them, to decide how we're going to respond to them, and to keep an eye on them. Okay, so the objective of project risk management is to increase the probability or impact of positive risks and to decrease the probability and impact of negative risks in order that we can get a very good outcome for our projects. And what we're looking at right now is the project management body of knowledge is definition of what project risk management is all about. Okay, so as we said before, RAID is an acronym and it stands for risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies. So the R stands for risk, and risk can either be positive or negative. And as we all know, when you say something is risky, it kind of implies that you haven't actually done it yet. You're just kind of like observing from where you're standing whether or not you should take it on board. So risks are things that haven't actually happened when we are talking about it in the project management context. So these are things that you've kind of identified and you understand that what kind of risk is it going to bring to the project? Is it a positive risk or is it a negative risk? Once you've identified the risk, then the next thing is to then decide whether you're going to accept it, escalate it, avoid it, or transfer it. But we'll look at that in more detail when we come to how we manage these items. And then the other thing about risk is now you want to give it some level of weighting so you can get a sense of how it will be managed. The A stands for assumptions, and assumptions are those elements of projects that we deem to be true but could change depending on what happens in the wider world context. So whenever we are putting together a project team, for instance, the assumption is that as we have taken on that project manager, we've taken on that business analyst and the planner, that they're going to be there for the duration of the project. That is it. That's an assumption because anything could happen. They may want to leave for whatever reason. The project might actually be cut short. So assumptions are those decisions. They are those decisions that we make as part of a project, and we just assume that that's going to be fine until it is otherwise. And from a project management point of view, whenever you're making decisions, you want to really assess your assumptions and have a sense of, well, what happens if that assumption is wrong? And from time to time, a project team will come together and test their assumptions to make sure that they are in a good place. So the I stands for issues, and issues, unlike risks, are actually happening at that present time. So it's something that has been identified. It's actually happening at this moment in time, and there is a need to decide what to do. Dependencies, so the D stands for dependencies, and dependencies are within a project management context, they are the tasks that are connected with one another. So in order, for instance, in order for you to start a project, you are dependent on a project budget being available. You are dependent upon the right expertise being gathered. So when we talk about it from the perspective of a portfolio point, so you might have projects and programs and different work streams that are happening within this project portfolio, and they may be connected to one another. So being able to understand, for instance, if your project is supposed to deliver something so that another project can have use of it, then that is a dependency. And as a project team, as a project community, dependencies have to be discussed and shared so that we all understand who's relying on who, and if those things slip, what's the impact on the projects that are interrelated with one another. Okay, let's understand why project RAID management is so important. Teamwork. First of all, let's accept that risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies are very key elements of any project. Deciding what they are should be a team effort, because what you have is professionals from different perspectives and with different expertise coming together to understand that risk or that particular issue, coming together to plan and control how that particular risk or that particular issue is impacting the project. And then having gone through that process, they can then discuss and agree the way forward. And as we all know, two heads are always better than one. Let's look at something else. Knowledge sharing. Now, just imagine we have some very knowledgeable professionals who have come together to talk about the risks, assumptions, and the issues and the dependencies of their project. And whatever they've discussed and agreed would now become the way that they're going to go forward. Now, all that they have put together now is information, and that information can now be shared. That information can be shared within the team, within their networks, and even across the organization. And lastly, resource management. Now, when you have a process within your project management community where this is now going on across all your projects and across all the work happening within your portfolio, and you are recording this information and sharing this information, it gives the people who are managing resources a good sense of how they should manage their expertise. Say, for instance, a very sizable risk has been identified on the horizon. It will be an opportunity for the senior managers to begin to think about, what should we do about this? Do we need to get somebody in part-time? Do we need to get some consultancy in? How do we manage what is coming? And even if you're talking about some issues that are happening right now, do we need to redeploy our resources so that we can manage this issue properly? Do we have to do it in such a way that we can manage the issue across the board, or do we need to come into that particular project and manage the issue from that perspective? And if you have a very good sense of where your people and your expertise is being deployed, it can then help with your budgets. It begins to inform you, do I need to get some materials that are going to support this particular effort or this particular expertise? Do I need to get some software applications? You know, if you're working in construction, do you have to go out and buy some steel or something like that? You know, it begins to now help you channel the effort around money and the effort around materials more effectively. And that's why project RAID management is so important.